So the first thing to tell you is that our PDFs have had a huge overhaul. So we've amended the design for the printouts for quotes, purchase orders, invoices, and job reports. So if I go into a quote, and I want to show you how this looks. So I've got a quote, I've added some items to the worksheet, so I've added some parts and some labor. So if I go to my print preview, and you'll notice now that this more closely resembles the invoices, so it's now in a grid system, and it's a little easier to look at. So basically what we've done is we've standardized the layout for the address, the payment terms, the reference numbers, all standardized between all of the various types of PDF that you can export from Service 365. Okay. Now also, we're happy to tell you that we now have a company files repository as well. So you're already able to upload files to quotes and to jobs, but now you can upload them in a central repository as well. So if I go into company files, you can see here I've uploaded the company handbook. So to upload a file, you just go to the hamburger menu and file manager, select your file. I'll upload the company handbook again and upload. And then these files can now be viewed by anybody within your organization who can log into Service 365. So another nice new feature in the admin section, if you have access to this, is you can now customize the emails that get sent through the system. So whenever you send a quote, a purchase order, anything that you can send through the system via an email, you can now customize the text here, set your text so that you don't have to change it each time. So for that, you just go into admin, emails and files, and now you can customize the text. So let's look at what's new in Timesheets in the August 2023 release. So the first thing you'll notice is if I go to add some time, so if I add some time for shop time, for example, so I'm going to add a time slice for training. So if I select the start time as 12 and the end time as 12:06, notice how it's rounded up to 0.25 hours. So this helps you charge out in 15-minute blocks of time. Within quotes, you can have an approval threshold. So what that means is if we go into admin, quote settings and quote type. So earlier in the year, we brought in an approval threshold, which I have set here to $5,000. So what that means is that an employee without managerial permissions can't send a quote directly to a customer if it's over $5,000 if the quote hasn't been approved. So he has to get that quote approved by a manager before he sends it out. So previously it was the case that the manager themselves would have to send out that quote, but we've now changed things around so that once the manager approves the quote, the original creator of it can send it out. So I'll show you how this works. If we go into quotes, and I have a quote here with a value of $6,000. So that's obviously above our $5,000 approval threshold. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go masquerade as employee John Doe, because John Doe does not have permission to send quotes to customers unless they are approved. So if we go into quotes and we find the quote $6,000, there it is. So now that we're logged in as John, we go to the print preview, and you'll notice that he can't download it, he can't send it directly to the customer. All John can do is send it for approval. So we'll hit send for approval. Now the quote is in waiting approval status. So now I'm going to go back to being logged in as myself, and I have the relevant permissions here. So I go back into quotes, and you'll notice if I switch to the bucket view, and I have a new bucket waiting approval. And there is the quote a moment ago. John Doe sent that for approval, so I can go back into it now. Go back to the print preview. In fact, I don't even need to go there. I can go to the hamburger menu and approve the quotes. We'll say yes. And now John Doe will have permission to send that directly to the customer. So that's the new approvals process. If you don't have the permission to send a quote directly to a customer because it's above your approval limit, you send it for approval to a manager, manager approves it, and then the original creator of the quote can send it to the customer. So that's the new process there. Okay, I'm going to show you another new feature that relates to quotes, and this is for items where you have zero quantity in stock, but you still need to know the cost that it was last bought for. So if I go into my inventory, you'll notice I have a bunch of items here where I have some quantity in stock, and it's showing me that the cost on this item, for example, is $3.29 per unit. So that's the average cost of all of the pieces that I have in stock right now, so it's averaging the cost. But if you have an item that has zero quantity in stock, then previously it wouldn't show you any cost on the quote. So if we go into this item, for example, you'll see that my quantity in stock is 0, and so my unit cost is 0. But if I go into the cost history, you can see that I previously bought this part for $3 per unit. So if I go into a quote, I can go into any quote here, and I'm going to add that item to my worksheet. So I'll go to worksheet, add an item, paste in the item number, there it is, the 60-watt light bulb, and it's now showing me my unit cost is $3 per unit. So instead of showing you a cost of 0 and then forcing you to go and look up how much you paid for it previously, it's going to take the most recent price that you bought it for, and that will be your unit cost on a quote. So the first thing I want to show you is, you'll notice that on this job I'm both the project manager and the only allowed resource. So an allowed resource is somebody that can view a job, edit the details, and add their time to it. So unless you have the show all jobs permission, you must be an allowed resource on the job in order to do that. So now though, with the new update that we've made, if I go and add some time for somebody else on the job, so remember I'm the project manager here, if I add an hour of time for John Doe, so his time is now on the job, and if I go back to the details tab, now he's an allowed resource as well, so he can add his time himself going forward. So that'll save you a little bit of time. You don't need to make him an allowed resource, just add the time that he did, and then he can add his own time going forward. So also, while we're talking about things that save time, so if I'm adding items to the job, so if I'm adding parts, I can now add a group of parts to a job. So earlier this year we created groups of parts, and you can add those to a quote. Now you can add them to a job as well. So I'm going to add a group here. So for each part that's within that group, I just set my required quantity and click add, and now it's added all 3 of those line items in one go. So I'm going to commit these to the job, because I want to show you another new feature in a second relating to invoicing. So I'm going to commit all these parts. Okay, and now that I have my parts committed, I'm going to head over to the invoicing tab, and I'm going to make my invoice. So I'm going to go say final invoice, and yes. And now you have 2 new options here, group labor and group material. So if I group material, remember I've got 3 separate line items on this job. If I save and process the invoice, and now it's combined all of my material into one line item and just put the total rather than 3 individual line items on the invoice. So another option you have to customize your invoices, if that's something you wish to do, group your labor, group your material, or do both. The first new feature with POs relates to how quickly an item hits your inventory after you receive it. So currently the process is you receive the item in the system, because you physically receive it, then you receive the item in the system, but it won't actually go into your inventory until the PO is closed. Now you can't close the PO until you get the vendor invoice. So if you have a large PO with dozens and dozens of line items on it, and maybe that's going to be spread across multiple vendor invoices, but you need that stock to hit your inventory straight away so that it can be used on jobs. So we have a new feature here that's going to enable this to happen. So you can see here that I have a purchase order which has 1 line item on it, just to demonstrate here. So I added the line item, quantity of 10, unit cost of $2, and I've released the PO. So now we're going to pretend that we've actually received the item. So I'll go to packing slips, and I'm going to upload my packing slip. So I'm just going to choose a sample packing slip here, upload, and I'm going to receive all 10. So I ordered 10, I'm going to receive 10. Okay, now assuming that I don't get the vendor invoice for a while, I can still add these items to my inventory now. So just to show you, this line item here, this light bulb, it's showing that I have, in Mississauga, I have 0 quantity in stock. Okay, even though we've received the PO, it hasn't hit my inventory yet. But what I can now do is go over to the hamburger menu and go commit received lines to inventory, and it's saying I cannot change the cost after this. So if the cost on the vendor invoice is different to what we were expecting, we cannot change it after this, but I'm going to say yes. Okay, committed received to inventory. So back to my inventory item, remember 0 in stock in Mississauga. Let's refresh. And there are my 10. So the PO's still open, I don't have the vendor invoice yet, but I do have now these 10 pieces in stock in Mississauga, and they can be used on a job. So I'm going to show you another feature relating to POs that's coming in August. So if I go into a PO, so now when I add a line item, I'm going to add some conduit to this PO. Just going to say I want 1. And you'll notice that it's defaulted to pieces as being my unit of measure. And now if you click the drop down box, you can create a new unit of measure, and I can select from my list. This is pulling from your admin settings to say I want to use feet, and the quantity per is 1. Save that, and now there are my options. I can order it in pieces or feet, or I can create a new unit of measure. So you can do that now all directly within a PO itself. The first item here relates to single-use items. So a single-use item is where you create something that you don't have in inventory as a one-off because you need it on a job and it's not something that you have in your inventory right now. So this is about being able to convert it to a regular inventory item when the item is actually in use on a quote. So within a quote here, I've created a single-use item called Item for Demo. I've added 1 with a cost of $5 to my quote. So if I click on the item, you'll see I have this convert to inventory button. So if I click that and say yes, and now you'll see it's changed the name from single use item. It's actually added an item number just like all of my other parts would have. So if I can click through to it from here, and now it's in my inventory with a number, I can change the name and I can change all of the other details to it. So you can now convert a single use item to an inventory item, even if it's in use on a quote. Just do be aware though, however, that you still can't do that if it's in use on a job. Another new feature we brought out, if I go into admin here and I go to responsibility center, we have the option now that if somebody tries to commit more parts to a job than the system says are in stock, you can actually have your purchasing person receive an automated email that lets them know that. So the use case here is the guy tries to commit 10 parts on a job because he physically has those parts, but the system's only showing 5 in stock. So this is like a prompt. The guy's going to get an email and say, hey, the guy tried to commit 10, you're only showing 5, maybe you need to make a manual adjustment here, adjust 5 pieces into your inventory. So you go to admin and responsibility center. If you only have 1 branch, it's only going to show 1 entry on this page. So click the pencil icon and scroll right to the bottom, and I now have a new box called Inventory Admin. And here is where I can go through my list of employees and I can say who should receive an email if somebody tries to commit more parts than we have in stock.